not guilty?
No, unfortunately, we haven't had that opportunity to speak to the journalist involved in the actual covering of the court case itself. So in that sense, I can't give you a direct answer on that. But certainly, people here have been expecting this decision all week. It came as quite some surprise that Graham Bold took the stance he did yesterday and this morning. And indeed, as Paul has pointed out, something even to journalists quite surprised. I think we have movement now outside the court. Yes, indeed, here they come. This is a moment that the men have been waiting now for. The families, the cheering. As they come up towards the camera point to talk to men, to the press. Here they come. Our first glimpse of the Birmingham 6, a campaign that so many people have been involved in throughout Ireland and throughout Britain, indeed throughout the world. That's Paddy very humble there, running over to the crowd to embrace the supporters who've gathered here in really the last few hours, because we have no prior warning of this. We should be going through that microphone very, very soon. This is Matthew Kenny, Billy Power, distinguished men at this stage. Standing to the left there, Hugh Callahan, Richard Matthew Kenny, Billy Power. Paddy Hill coming towards the microphone.
It's good to see you all. We waited a long time for this. 16 years because of hypocrisy, brutality. But every dog has its day, and we're going to have ours. Ladies and gentlemen, for 16 and a half years, we've been used as political scapegoats for people in there at the highest. The police told us from the start that they knew we hadn't done it. They told us they didn't care who done it. They told us they acted and that they were going to frame us just to keep people in there happy. That's what it's all about. Justice! Justice! I don't think them people in there have got the intelligence nor the honesty to spell the word, never mind dispense it. They're rotten!
I've done 16 years in prison for a long time. Justice has been done today, but it's took 16 years for this justice to happen. Thank you very much.
Hugh Callahan, a man whose voice we heard most recently on the Pat Kenny show, taken from long lost prison. When the preliminary hearing, the last preliminary hearing, decided that it would go to a full hearing, that the DPP decided that there would be no grounds to try and uphold those convictions.
No, hold on, please. First, I would like to know why. Why is it that Judith Ward is still in prison and we are released? Dr. Hughes put away Judith Ward. She should be released as soon as possible. There are many more people behind prison bars, wrongly convicted, not only Irish, including English people. John McGronigan is coming for appeal soon, should be released. The Tottenham 3, Bridgewater 4, and a long list of other prisoners who've been asking the same as us.
Somebody else says.
Just said a few words. Chris. All right, Chris.
We're going to show the world, and we're going to prove to everybody what they done to us.
to thank everyone who turned up here today and everyone who's been working so hard for us for all over the years. The campaigners, our families, and everyone. Thank everybody. Thank you all.
I would like to thank everybody that helped us. Chris Mullen, Sir John Farr, and all the rest of the English people that's helped us over the years. Thank you very much.
Right, let's take the six together. They're asking again for the six.
Six together. Six.
No, Charlie, six. Let's go.
Come on, Ireland, here we come.
John, come back here.
The direct families getting into limousine provided for them by the Birmingham 6 campaign. They've been organising frantically throughout the week for this particular day. For the day that they've been thinking about, working for, and indeed for many praying for so many, many years. For so long the wives felt no one would listen to them. Then the campaigns began in earnest, people joined, some politicians became involved. And now a day of great jubilation, a day of freedom for the Birmingham 6. Family members leaving in minibuses. And now all that remains in the Old Bailey. The friends, the campaigners, the well-wishers, those who came here at short notice to welcome these men as they left free, innocent from the Old Bailey Court of Criminal Justice here in Central.
And here in Dublin, watching those scenes of joy and jubilation and indeed triumph, and the Birmingham 6 being driven away to savour their first moments of freedom. As John Walker said, Ireland, here we come, but can even Ireland of the welcomes make up for what they've suffered over those 16 years? We're joined now on phone by Father Dennis Fall, who was deeply involved in the campaign to free the 6 almost from the outset. Father Fall, your immediate reaction to these scenes?
I'm very pleased that these men have got out at last, these unfortunate men, and very pleased for the 15.5 years. We had got involved in this in the spring of '75, before they were even convicted, to Mrs. Hunter, who was the mother of Jared Hunter. She's dead now, Lord of Mercy. She appealed to us to get involved, and myself and Father Murray and Father Brady and Sister Sarah. We carried that thing along for 10 years, and it was very funny because it was most unpopular. We were followed around Birmingham by police officers and special branch people. We got no reception from the government in London or the government in Dublin or from the bishops, except for Edward Daly of Derry. No other bishop showed any heed for about 10 or 12 years. The thing was, and then Father Murray, I think, is the man that put in the most work. He concentrated on the forensic evidence, went to America, tried to get the test done in America. That was blocked by the Dublin government. So finally handed over all our papers to Chris Mullen then, and he wrote a very good book on it. Of course, being a member of Parliament in England. I'm delighted that they're out.
Father Fall, it now seems that they may be about to say a lot more than they were prepared to say behind bars. We had Paddy Joe Hill there saying that from the very word go, the police told them that they were being set up, that they were going to be framed.
Oh, well, we knew that all along. They said any six will do. That was the set at the time. Any six will do. The whole thing was to get Irish hostages in to keep Birmingham quiet.
But they told these very men, you'll do. We know you didn't do it, and we're going to frame you.
That's it. Any six will do. The same thing with the Guildford Four and the McGrath, particularly the McGrath family. They were the classic examples of particularly Irish hostages to keep them quiet. There is a deep anti-Irish prejudice in England, and a deep fear of the Irish, and it manifests itself when the IRA let off these bombs. And of course, the IRA should be hanging their heads in shame today. They're the people who should hang their heads in shame, because they wouldn't even acknowledge it. I went to the chiefs of the Sinn Féin about 78 at the request of Brian Rose Smith, who was the solicitor of the men at that time, after Denning had turned them down at the appalling Vista judgment. And we were in black despair at the time, and Brian Rose Smith says, go and get Sinn Féin to get the IRA to at least admit that they did it, and then we might open up a line of dialogue with the Home Office. But I did see the chief men. They laughed at me. Thought it was a joke.
But would you go so far as Paddy Joe Hill there, where he says he actually said that he pointed the finger at the whole system of justice, to their Lord Justice and themselves. He said they just don't know what justice is about in there. They're rotten. Would it extend that far?
I would agree with that. Yes, 8 judges handled that case. There was the Bridges at the start. Then there was 3 appeal judges led by Widgery, and then there was Lord Denning, the famous Lord Denning. And then there was the 3 judges at the last appeal, Lane and those ones. And they're all blackguards. They shouldn't be judges at all. They should resign. Obviously, there should be a big change in the selection, education and qualification of judges. And the whole system of criminal justice would need to be amended. Leading off, I think, in Ireland and England with the tape recording and vision and tape, video recording with sound and vision of every police interview in every police station. It's very cheap compared to what they're paying out for these expensive appeals and this dreadful injustice. And the Dublin government adopted the appalling Vista part of Denning's judgment as part of the common law in Ireland and used it against Nicky Kelly. So where do you begin or end to unravel the ramifications of this affair?
Does today's verdict totally clear the men? Does it leave perhaps a legal question mark over whether they were guilty, and does it totally vindicate them?
I think it totally vindicates them. I think the judge who had this particular case, Lloyd, he was determined to see that justice was done, and I think he'll clear up all the loose ends. I think, but when you think of all the policemen who got promotion on these cases, Guildford Four, Annie Maguire and the Birmingham, all the policemen that got amazing promotion, all the prosecuting counsel became judges, all the judges became judges of appeal and masters of the rules and all the rest. You know, everybody climbed up to wealth and fame and privilege on the backs of these 6 unfortunate, or 17 unfortunate Irish people. Don't forget, 11 of them would have been hanged if there had been capital punishment in England. So the whole thing makes the common man, the ordinary man, wonder, is there justice for him? Who's going to guarantee justice? The politicians failed. They who take an oath to uphold the laws of the land. The judges failed, who also take an oath to. It was the paramilitary people, not the paramilitary, but the paralegal people, such as Amnesty International, the Council for Civil Liberties, and the campaigners like Chris Mullen and of course Garrett Pearce, who's a special kind of person, and a couple of unfortunate clergymen who got nothing but dog's abuse over it.
Father Fall
carried this thing. You see, so what is the common man going to say to his government? What is he going to say to his judges? They get money and power and privilege to look after his rights and haven't done it.
Do you believe, Father, that there's anything in what Billy Power had to say about other cases? He was very insistent that there were other cases, not just Irish people, but British people.
There are many other cases. There's a Judith Ward case, there's a Patrick O'Loughlin case, a fellow from Derry. And there are many cases in the north of Ireland, where many men in Long-Kesh and in the prisons in Northern Ireland who were unjustly convicted along the same lines, brutality. phony evidence, made-up confessions. The Ezra tests, if they were applied, would show quite a lot, you know. And then the same thing in England. I mean, in my experience in England, about 4 people have got off. They were up on Irish political cases. Dr. O'Shea was one. The Wiltshire 3 got off, luckily enough, on an appeal. And then there was some fellas from Brain 3. And there was a Mrs. Donnelly who got off because her husband committed suicide by jumping off the Vauxhall Bridge, and she had a certain amount of sympathy. But the others all went down. I'm not justifying anything the IRA do, and by no means, and they shouldn't be bombing in England. And there's 21 unfortunate young people dead in Birmingham. And I think that the biggest thing I would want to see to come out of today's verdict is that the IRA called off the campaign. That would be the proper thing. It's hang their heads in shame. They caused all this trouble between the Irish and the English, and there was no need for it. And they caused these 16 men to go into jail. They can't wash their hands of it. Because anyone knows the way the English will react if you touch them, and especially if the Irish touch them. They'll react. They're very violent people, and they'll react violently in defence of their own realm. We've seen that down through history. And the IRA or the people someone should put the question to them. They gave us no help, as I say. The one time they were appealed to, they wouldn't even acknowledge the dirty work they did to give the men a helping hand. They acknowledged it later on when the British left-wing Labour MPs came over and asked them in 83 or 4. It was typical of the Irish, you know, to bow down in worship before the left-wing British MPs. Good men they are. But to refuse the request of their own priests and nuns in favour of the poor Irish.
Father Dennis Fall, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining with us on this day. We're going over now to Leinster House and our political editor, Donald Kelly.
Well, a statement a few moments ago from the government on the release of the 6 says the government warmly welcomes the release of the 6 and the final vindication of their innocence. And the statement says the overwhelming majority of people in this country, together with concerned people in Britain and the United States and elsewhere, will share similar feelings of joy and relief at the news. Inevitably, however, the government says these feelings are mixed with sadness at the length of time these innocent men have spent in prison. The government says it would in particular wish to express admiration of the courage and fortitude shown by the 6 over 16 wasted years. It says the outcome is above all their own personal victory. It acknowledges the great humanity of all those who campaigned so courageously on their behalf and expresses Ireland's debt of gratitude to those people. It says the efforts of the campaigners, together with the skill and perseverance of the men's legal advisers and the support and solidarity of their families, had brought about today's historic development. The government says the court's decision is especially satisfactory as it comes a relatively short time after the dramatic repudiation of the convictions of the Guildford Four and the encouraging developments in the Maguire case. It goes on that nothing can recompense the men for their lost years, but an immediate first step, it says, at this stage must be for the British authorities to ensure that the level of compensation paid to the 6 is commensurate with the scale of the injustice endured by them and their families. And the government says it is clearly imperative that the implications of these cases be looked at to ensure that the miscarriage of justice which led to the convictions of the men and their lengthy imprisonment of innocent people can never be repeated. And it ends by saying, we wish the men and their families peace and happiness for the future. And I'm sure there'll be many statements from the opposition party shortly expressing similar sentiments. Back now to the studio.
One question, Donald, if you can hear me. The British Home Secretary, well, it's really a point of information, Kenneth Baker has said a short time ago in the Commons that a Royal Commission review of criminal justice, of the whole criminal justice process, is to be undertaken. Does that, in your opinion, tie in with what the government would now be requesting?
Well, I think that's something that would be welcomed by the government. The government has always maintained that the whole British judicial system, in the light of all that has happened in a number of Irish cases, including the 6, really needs to be looked at, and I'm sure it will be welcoming the Home Secretary's announcement of a Royal Commission.
Is there any question, Donald, could I finally ask you, of government defensiveness, not just this government but successive governments, in terms of how they performed in relation to the Birmingham 6? Some of them have been less than complimentary about how the various Irish governments did operate.
Well, I know that's what the six say, and there is some evidence to support their complaints in that regard. A number of individual politicians from all parties took up the campaign of the 6 practically from day one. They were convinced from very early on that the 6 were innocent men, and they campaigned accordingly. Governments have to move A bit more slowly. They have to examine all the evidence. They have to look at all the aspects of the cases before they can throw the full weight of their authority and, by extension, the authority of the Irish nation behind a particular campaign. And I think in this case it's fair to say that successive governments did move slowly. But once they became convinced, they put the full weight of their authority behind the campaigns.
Thank you, Donald. And we're moving back to London now to Brian O'Connell, who was in court when Lord Justice Lloyd made his momentous announcement. Brian, what was it like?
Hello, yes, well, here with me is Bishop Edward Daly of Derry, who was in court when the Birmingham Six were freed. Your initial reaction first, Bishop?
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled and absolutely delighted for the men, for their families. It's the end of a long, long struggle, the end of a long, long nightmare. And ultimately the truth has emerged for all the world to see.
You've sat through practically every minute of this, nearly 2-week appeal. Did you at any stage think it wasn't going to happen?
Well, I was only here for 3 days last week, and this is the first day I've been able to get here this week. Well, I suppose there were moments of doubt, but I had great confidence this time, and especially from the opening presentation, the opening submission of Michael Mansfield, which I thought was enormously impressive. And I think today as well, I was very impressed by his presentation and explanation of the case.
What did you think of the DPP's position? It wasn't really clear. He was asking seemingly to say that they were unsatisfactory but still safe. It seemed a rather strange position for
Well,
him
as
to
Michael
take.
Mansfield said, he seemed to be riding two horses going in different directions. But I'm not a legal expert. I think you better ask a legal expert that.
What position do you think this leaves British justice in now?
Well, it's too early yet for analysis, but certainly it raises many, many very serious and profound questions that 16 men, or 6 men should spend 16 years in prison, go through 2 appeals, and still their innocence shouldn't be established. A system which allows that to happen certainly has some very, very serious and profound problems that need to be looked at very urgently.
How sort of difficulty do you think the men are going to have now getting back into normal life, normal family life? It must be fairly institutionalised after that length of time in jail.
Each of them is an individual, and I'm quite sure they'll have their own means of doing that. John Walker will be coming back to Derry. We look forward to welcoming him there. He's coming into very much a welcoming community, back to his wife, and I'm sure that will be, he'll have the kind of stability there that I'm sure he will enjoy.
Do you see this as having any implications for extradition, or do you see cases like Birmingham 6 separate from that issue?
Well, I've been involved in this case basically to try and ensure that justice will be done in this case. I've always believed that these men were innocent, and my effort has been solely and exclusively to try and prove their innocence, and to assist in doing that, and to assist those who are endeavouring to do that all along the way.
So you're a happy man today?
Yes, I'm a very happy man today.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Well, as you heard there, Bishop Daly talking about the release of the Birmingham Six, what Lord Justice Lloyd actually said was that we have decided your appeals are allowed. You are now free to go, subject to the usual formalities. The reasons for this decision will be given at a later date. Now back to Dublin.
I don't know whether Brian can hear me.
Yes,
Brian? Yes, Brian. Were you in court, Brian? Did you see the scenes there when the verdict was announced?
Yes, when they were announced, it came quite quickly, actually, in a sense, because Michael Mansfield had been replying to some of the points raised by Graham Bold, counsel for the Director of Public Prosecutions, this morning. And it seemed as if, at that point, it was about 3:30, as if the case was going to go on until tomorrow morning. People were really beginning to doubt that it would happen today. They thought possibly Michael Mansfield would take the rest of the day to finish, then the judges would come back tomorrow morning, possibly say that the men were free to go, as they in fact did, and then reserve their decision for perhaps a week, maybe 2 weeks. Nobody expected it to come quite as quickly as it did.
Brian, we're losing you there. Picture breakup. I think we'll try to get back to you later on. We're going now to Pat McCartan of the Workers' Party, who's in our... Oh, no, we don't have Pat McCartan as yet. Brian, stay with us. Will you... Brian is also gone, I gather. So what we can do is recap just briefly. The Birmingham Six, as you know by now, were freed by the Court of Appeal of the Old Bailey today, 15 years and 7 months after being jailed for what was described as the IRA's worst mainland atrocities, which killed 21 people. You saw them released there. You saw what they said. And I gather that we're joined by Pat McCartan. You also, Pat McCartan, in our thought studio, probably heard the men. Were you surprised by their demeanour? Were you surprised by the bitterness that they expressed, particularly about how they were treated immediately after they were taken in?
No, not at all. I don't think any of us out here could begin to imagine how a person should behave or react on walking out for the first time almost 17 years after they had been taken in wrongly into custody. The fact that they show the restraint that they did, to my mind, is remarkable. I met them once ever during their time of incarceration, and I was just completely lost to know what to say to them or how to give them any hope or to give them encouragement. I think that they have a very profound story to tell for themselves now, once they are free of all the legal constraints and all of the political constraints that have been bearing down on their campaign for the last number of years. I think they have to now tell the story themselves, for themselves, about what happened to them in police custody, how they were treated, the way they were abused, the way they were fitted up, as has now been established as common case. And then how people represented to them as they began to try and get momentum to their campaign declaring their innocence. They have rightly, I think, identified that it was a very, very hard job to convince people right across the board, politicians, members of government, members of diplomatic missions, lawyers, prison visitors, everyone, of their absolute innocence. And I think there is a very, very disturbing story to be put down now as to what happened to these people and their experiences of it.
As to their absolute innocence, were you satisfied in law with what was said in the court today, that does totally vindicate them?
It does entirely. Right from the word go, the police prosecution relied upon two basic strands of evidence, that of self-confessions and of forensic evidence. Both of those pieces of evidence have been utterly and totally torn to shreds at this stage, and there can be absolutely no doubt about it. That what was here were 6 people of Irish extraction who, in the heat and the wave of understandable recoil to what happened in Birmingham in that awful period, were picked up innocently and made to carry the blame. They found themselves in the dock, in prison, arising out of a period of almost mass hysteria. But most importantly, and here the condemnation rests squarely on the shoulders of the politicians in government of the day and of the police in charge of the investigation of the day, that they were panicked into moving at all cost to any innocent person to simply get someone and put them in the dock and put them away for those horrible crimes.
Is it possible now that the establishment in Britain will move with kind of anodyne measures to try to make up for this? Or are you impressed by what British Home Secretary Kenneth Baker had to say in the Commons not so long ago, a short time ago, that a Royal Commission review of the criminal justice process is now to be undertaken because of all this?
I think we have to have some regard to what has happened, long and torturous though it has taken. Remember that the Court of Criminal Appeal in our own country here has never, after such an elapse of time or anything approaching it, ever had the capacity to put things right. We've never had any section of the police force here investigate another section and expose it for its corruption, expose it for its wrongdoing. So that I don't think we should in any way minimise the impact that both the Guildford case and the Birmingham 6 case will have on the British judicial system in the long term. Remember that there is a wide-searching investigation now going on arising out of the Guildford case itself, and that it's government appointed and it's in public and it is fully sworn. That's the kind of inquiry, again, we've never had in this country in regard to any of the cases of miscarriage of justice that have occurred here. And there are people out about in our community who have as grievances, perhaps not as long in time, but certainly as heartfelt and as sore as that of the Guildford and Birmingham people. So that I don't think we should underestimate what has happened. The great tragedy, obviously, is that it has taken both the Guildford defendants and the Birmingham 6 defendants so long, and so much damage and cost to themselves and their families to get this distance. But now it has been done, and I don't think things will ever be the same again for British justice and the administration of these cases over that.
We have information coming in now that Kenneth Baker has added that he's sure a major reform bill will follow this commission that will be set up. Again, is that the direction you think they ought to and will move in?
I think it has to be. I would have thought that certainly a full judicial inquiry on the same lines as the Guildford case must be initiated into the circumstances surrounding the Birmingham case. I think they've gone this far to expose the gravity of the injustices now that the men themselves are available, free from all sanction and free from all intimidation of prison and otherwise, that they must be given a public forum in which they can outline in detail and in full as innocent people. And remember, that is now the major importance change in their circumstance. That now, as far as the courts are concerned, the government is concerned, and the public generally in Britain is concerned, that they're dealing with 6 innocent people who have a story to tell, who have testimony to give, and they must be given the forum to do that. And certainly, following on from such an inquiry, the conclusions of a commission translated into legislation will go a great deal along the lines of at least beginning to address the problems that exist and undoubtedly exist in that system. In our own situation here, we have in Parliament recognised that there are parallels to be drawn. We have established our own commission. It has reported, and we're waiting on our Minister for Justice now for over a year to act upon that report.
OK, Pat McCartan of the Workers' Party in our Dáil studio, thank you for joining us and talking to us. We're joined now by phone, on the phone by the Taoiseach, Mr. Haughey. Mr. Haughey, your immediate reaction to what happened?
My immediate reaction is joy, happiness, and also a great sense of relief. Delighted that the men are finally free, and relieved that their agony is over and that the tremendous injustice has been put right.
What's your opinion of the Kenneth Baker's statement that there will be a Royal Commission review now of the whole criminal justice process in Britain?
Well, of course, I think the government have put out a statement about the thing, and one of the items we referred to in that statement is that the cases of the Birmingham 6, the Guildford 4 and the Maguires must all be looked at with a view to their very serious deep implications for the whole system of justice which dealt with them, and particularly major effort made to ensure that this sort of thing can never happen again. But I think one of the things we must keep in mind at this stage is the wonderful efforts made by so many people, concerned people, who showed great humanity in persisting with these cases over such a long period, way back from the very beginning when Father Fall, for instance, became involved. But all the people in Ireland, and particularly I think the principal people in Britain who took up these cases and fought so vigorously for the release of the Birmingham 6.
Taoiseach, in the light of the bitterness immediately expressed by at least 2 of these men as they came onto the streets outside the Old Bailey, do you think this could have any implication for the extradition process here?
No, I don't think so. No, we have to have extradition. That we have a system now in place which has very specific safeguards. We now watch over every extradition case with great concern and great anxiety, and we are determined to ensure that in every case the Irish person who is extradited will get an absolutely fair trial.
Well, Billy Power did talk afterwards of other Irish people, indeed British as well, but Irish people whom he felt were wrongfully imprisoned. Are you aware of any such cases, Taoiseach?
Well, I know of reports of different types of complaints, but I suppose in any legal system there will be mistakes made and wrongs committed. But what we hope that from now on that
the British legal and judicial system, and indeed all other legal and judicial systems, will have built into them the mechanisms to ensure that any such wrongs can be identified and ultimately put right.
Finally, Taoiseach, John Walker, just as they left, said, "Ireland, here we come." Now, have you and the government any plans to celebrate and to welcome the homecoming of these men?
We have no specific plans at the moment, but of course we will make them very, very welcome indeed. But I think that should be left very much to them and to their families and to the wishes of the men and their families. We would be very glad to offer them the warmest of warm welcomes at national level, and indeed I'm sure at Dublin City level also. But we would like to do that sensitively and have full regard to whatever the men and their families would wish.
Finally, Taoiseach, for those who may be just joining us, to recapitulate very briefly again your reaction to today's event.
Well, my reaction is one of almost infinite joy and a great sense of relief that this awful wrong has finally been put right, and that we really share as near as we can with the wonderful feeling that must have come over the men themselves, who after all were the principal people who deserve the credit at this stage for their courage in enduring these 15 long years, and their families.
Taoiseach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And we're going now quickly to the Dáil studio once again, where we're joined by Fine Gael spokesman on Foreign Affairs, Jim O'Keefe. Jim O'Keefe, Fine Gael's view of today's release.
I hate to see injustice, and I'm absolutely delighted that this miscarriage of justice has been rectified after all these years, that the ordeal is over, and I would like very much to congratulate those involved and their families and wish them happiness in the years ahead. But the further thought that occurs to me is that who's responsible for the original bombing? The Provisional IRA were responsible. They were responsible for the original deaths of the 21 people and all those injured. They were also very largely responsible for the fact that those 6 men were inside in prison for the last 16 years. That's, I think, also has to be remembered. But my initial reaction is, of course, one of great joy for the men and for their families that after all these years their ordeal is over.
Do you think that perhaps politicians on all sides here on this side of the Irish Sea were perhaps a little slow to come to their aid, and that perhaps they're not going to gain a great deal of credit from the men now in their moment of triumph?
I haven't thought for a moment about gaining any credit out of this. I know that my predecessor as spokesman, indeed as Minister for Foreign Affairs, Peter Barry, was very actively involved over a long number of years. But it's not a question of credit. I look at it as I believe so much in the rule of law. I believe that where injustice is there must be rooted out. I'm absolutely delighted that this injustice has been rectified. I don't want to claim any credit for saying that. And I'm absolutely totally happy that the ordeal of these men is at long last is over. It's not a question of claiming credit in any way.
Are you satisfied that with, say, a Royal Commission review now of the whole criminal justice process in Britain, signalled by Kenneth Baker, that we're hopefully on the verge of a new era and that we will not see this kind of thing again? Because the men were apparently saying that this is still going on.
Well, I want to see, both in the UK and indeed here in our own country, procedures which will ensure that the rule of law is followed totally and completely at all times by all those involved in the administration of justice. That, I think, it would be very helpful that whatever changes are necessary are made in the UK. But let's not forget that the kind of review procedure which led to the release of the Birmingham 6 isn't even in existence here. We haven't even reached that stage. We have the report of Judge Martin, which is still lying on the shelf, so that I would very much like to see whatever changes are considered necessary in the UK to make sure that that kind of thing will never happen again are put in place. But I also would like to see that whatever changes are necessary here are also put in place with a minimum of delay. I think, you know, if you're in a glass house, you must be very careful about throwing stones.
And so, very briefly, do you think in that glass house we should ourselves perhaps have a look at our extradition situation again?
That's a separate issue. I think my views on extradition are very well known. I have made it very clear that I consider that our extradition legislation is not watertight. I've actually tabled an amending bill on behalf of Fine Gael, and I would hope that over a period of time I will be able to encourage the other parties in the Dáil to support that legislation.
Jim O'Keefe in our Dáil studio, thank you. Now, just to recap, the Birmingham Six have been freed by the Court of Appeal in London this afternoon. They'd spent 15 years, 7 months jailed for what was described as the IRA's worst mainland atrocity, which killed 21 people. There were deafening cheers, clapping for several minutes as Lord Justice Lloyd announced that the 21 murder convictions against the Six should be quashed. Lord Justice Lloyd said that 3 appeal judges sitting at the Old Bailey would give the reasons for the decision later, but he did say, in the light of fresh evidence which has become available since the last hearing in this court, your appeals will be allowed. And he then told the men they were free to go. And since their release, there's been widespread reaction from both church and state leaders. Let's just recap again what happened as these men came out. These were the scenes as they were released. Those pictures coming up.
I think we have movement now outside the court. Yes, indeed, here they come. This is a moment that the men have been waiting now for. The families, the cheering. They're going to come up towards the camera point to talk to men, to the press. Here they come. Our first glimpse of the Birmingham Six campaign that so many people have been involved in throughout Ireland, throughout Britain, indeed throughout the world.
We're going to show the world, and we're going to prove to everybody what they've done to us.